I'm here with Edward O'Donoghue, who is the Upper House member for the Eastern Victoria region. And the main reason why I wanted to see you, of course I wanted to meet you anyway, but there is something that you released the other day called Andrew's Secret Plan to Introduce Permits for Public Protests or Demonstrations. Now, in the last couple of months, there's been a lot of demonstrations that Reignite Democracy Australia has covered, all of them basically. So this is pretty close to my heart and the 50,000 members I have. So I want to find out the exact details of what is going on. So go for it. Tell me about this secret plan.
Well, I personally have been very concerned about the inability of people to congregate and to meet during lockdown, and I understand the medical reasons for that. When the virus was spreading, when there was a real risk to public health, of course you couldn't have large gatherings. Mm-hmm. As we move out of that phase and to a COVID normal sort of period, the ability for people to express themselves, to gather, socially distance, gather in a safe way, but to protest and express their views is fundamental to a democracy. And the way our rights and freedoms have been trampled by the Andrews government really concerns me. And I think it's important that people can express themselves. So when the Chief Health Officer said that a permit system may be introduced going forward for protests and demonstrations, that really concerned me, because that ultimately would give the government the ability to regulate who can protest and who can't. Now, the government stepped back from that to a degree, and that's welcome. But I think the point is we need to always ensure that our rights are not being unnecessarily trampled, aren't being unnecessarily infringed upon. And yes, there are circumstances like when the virus was spreading that it would be inappropriate to have mass gatherings. But we can't have those lockdowns, those restrictions for any longer than is absolutely necessary. And as a Liberal, as someone who deeply believes in our democracy and our freedoms that we are so lucky to have, they've got to be cherished and they've got to be preserved, and got to be very careful that they're not being reduced unnecessarily.
So where is this at now, this plan of theirs? Is it being stopped? What's next?
Well, I think we're waiting on the government to give us further information. That they're talking about a process to ensure that COVID safe practices are complied with, and that people who want to demonstrate or have demonstrations do it in a way that's COVID safe. Absolutely support that, absolutely recognise the need to do that, but this mustn't be used as a guise for government approval of some protests and not others.
But not at the moment, because there's no transmission. Like, would you still support everyone having to be 1.5 metres away at a protest when there's no transmission?
Look, I think with people in hotel quarantine with COVID, the risk of transmission is always there. And so we've got to do things smart, but not in a way that compromises, fundamental freedoms and liberties that Victorians have enjoyed and must continue to enjoy. So, this is a balance between public health and safety and freedom and liberty. But as the point, I think, is that we should never give away our freedoms without very good reason. Mm-hmm. And when we do, it should be for temporary time, and they should be returned at the earliest opportunity. And that's been my focus throughout the whole COVID process.
It's been a long temporary time this year of lack of freedoms, hasn't it?
It really has been.
Yeah.
And I think one of the few upsides of this whole time has been it's brought more people into the political process and understanding our democracy. And our freedoms aren't a given. They've got to be cherished and nurtured and preserved and fought for.
Yeah.
I say I'm proud to be a member of the Liberal Party that believes in those freedoms, but leaving politics aside, anyone who believes in democracy should have, I would have thought, a similar view. Mm-hmm. That so many people around the world don't have the freedoms we do, and we've got to make sure they are preserved for our children and our grandchildren. And yes, there'll be times when they need to be reduced, and for health reasons and other reasons, and that's okay, but they should never be trammeled unnecessarily and without good justification.
So with this particular situation here, with the plan to have permits, it's not coming up right away. We have time to fight it when the time comes. Is that correct?
Well, I think the government's working through a process, and the Chief Health Officer's leading that. And I think the outcry that came from the word permit process that the Chief Health Officer used has put the government on notice that yes, we need to do things in a COVID safe way, but don't use this as an excuse to say yes to some groups and no to other groups. I mean, I disagree with Marxists and a whole lot of those on the left, but I absolutely respect their view to protest and express themselves. That's fundamental to our democracy. If we can't express different opinions respectfully and listen to others and engage in debate, how can we ever grow as people? How can we live in a tolerant society?
Yeah, that's what we're fighting for. Opposing views are what makes a culture amazing.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I wonder, if someone wanted to apply for a permit to protest against Daniel Andrews, and they had to apply to Daniel Andrews, what do you think he'd say?
Well, this is the question, isn't it? This is the point. If someone wants to go and protest against the Liberal Party, go for it. Go for it. That is your right. Yeah. But it shouldn't be the Liberal Party or Scott Morrison, signing off on that. And same if people want to protest against the government, the Labor government, but what they're doing, it shouldn't be the government signing off on that.
No.
So we need to make sure there's a process in place that is transparent, that is understood, that is based on medical advice and health advice only, and doesn't allow political partisanship to come into the equation.
Exactly. Now, you actually did say in here, hang on, I had the right thing. Daniel Andrews has made kind of an attack on independent bodies like IBAC and The Ombudsman, and now with the protesting permit, I mean, it's going to be harder and harder to get independent advice on things.
The attacks on our integrity agencies is alarming. The way the IBAC funding was cut, we've had the Ombudsman call for extra funding publicly. That hardly ever happens. I mean, the Ombudsman and the IBAC Commissioner only speak out when they are desperate for resources to investigate corruption and inappropriate dealings. The fact that they've had to do that says everything about this government's priorities. And this is happening at a time when the Labor Party is being investigated for membership irregularities and branch stacking and all those sort of things.
Oh.
So you got to wonder why. What is the motivation of the government to cut funding to these critical bodies that are so important to ensuring good governance and rooting out corruption in the public sector? At
the same time, the budget for other things are going up and up and up. It feels like this is like really independent bodies like this are so important to our democracy. And I know IBAC for sure has gotten a lot of complaints lately because of the police conduct. So maybe they just don't want them to be able to process everything.
Well, it does raise, the question of what is motivating this. As you say, the government's borrowing billions and tens of billions of dollars, unprecedented borrowings. It's going to take, generations to pay back. Yet they can't find a few $1 million for IBAC and the Ombudsman to do their job properly. Why would they do that? What wrong priorities they have, and are they trying to stifle investigations? I mean, it's hard to understand.
Yeah, if you put two and two together, that's what you would have to think, that they are trying to stifle investigation. But we'll see. What's next with that? Is that decision being made? That's it?
Well, yesterday at the Attorney General was at the Public Accounts and Estimates Committee, the Victorian Estimates equivalent, and she revealed that under pressure, the government has now found some extra money for IBAC from a government trust.
Okay.
So it's sort of an off-budget, one-off allocation. So that may give IBAC some temporary funding relief. Whether it's enough, is an open question. And the fact they've had to do this now after the budget's handed down, raiding a hollow log in effect, when this should have just been dealt with as part of the budget process, and the IBAC Commissioner given the resources he needs to go after corruption.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a good thing that it happened because it did show a few things, I think,
Well, again, these integrity agencies are so central to good governance and functioning democracies. The Parliament has an important role in scrutinising government and the executive, but it's very rare that the Parliament itself can analyse contracts in deep,
They don't have the resources really.
No, so that's where the IBAC Commissioner has a really important role. And the IBAC Commission needs the resources to do that. These investigations can be complex. They can be time consuming, and they take hours and hours of professional investigators to get to the bottom of these things. It takes resources.
Yeah, exactly.
And those resources should be provided.
Yeah. So let's change the topic a little bit. We'll go to the hotel quarantine because is it the next one? So you and Georgie Crozier, made a joint press release. Oh, you always do joint press releases, it seems like, about the extension of the hotel quarantine investigation, and that was about, about a month ago. So it's coming up to that date now. Yep. So what's next with that?
So the final report of the Hotel Quarantine Enquiry will be tabled next Monday. That's when the full report is released. We had an interim report in early November, which was to give government some direction about the reopening of the Victorian hotel quarantine system. So the final report hopefully will go to, who's responsible for this fiasco that's cost over 800 lives, ruined so many small businesses, and forced all Victorians into a second lockdown that nowhere else in Australia has experienced. We need to be very clear about this. The second wave was caused by the negligence of the Andrews government, its incompetence in managing hotel quarantine, its refusal to deploy the ADF that was on offer, and it went for an inferior option, and we've all paid the price. We paid an enormous price. Yeah. And for all those families who've lost a loved one, all those families where, the small business has gone under, I'll be thinking, I think of them, and I think of the loss and the grief and the challenges that have been created unnecessarily. This did not occur anywhere else in Australia, and Victoria is going to be struggling now for years with higher debt, more unemployment, and this personal loss because of the hotel quarantine bungle. So the final report has an obligation to Victorians to lay bare what went wrong and why. My concern is because conflicts of evidence between key witnesses like Jenny Makakos and Daniel Andrews weren't further tested, we may not get those answers. So the Liberal Nationals under Michael O'Brien, we're committed to a Royal Commission if we win the next election in now less than 2 years' time, because Victorians deserve the truth. Mm-hmm. And with over 800 deaths, those families, those people who've died, they deserve the truth. And we'll pursue this until the full facts are known. The nonsense evidence of so many witnesses who couldn't remember key facts. They could remember all sorts of things except what mattered. They could remember all sorts of things about meetings they went to and things they did, except those that actually really counted. It's a disgrace.
And statements that were changed overnight.
And we've seen changed evidence and different positions. Very disappointing, I think, for Victorians. Yeah. So I hope Monday's report, when it's released, answers some of these questions. But we do know there is, further work to be done mm-hmm. with these conflicts of evidence from key witnesses, and that's why we're committed to a Royal Commission.
So I would say, well, you tell me, but is your gut feeling that the report on Monday won't really be what you want it to be, and you will have to take it further?
Well, I think just the key, the point that these conflicts of evidence, this amnesia that so many witnesses had, wasn't further tested in a way that I think so many people expected, means we'll need a Royal Commission. We also need to examine further some of the other issues associated with the hotel quarantine fiasco. And whilst the Parliament's done a quick reference on the contact tracing system, there are many questions that still remain about why our system was so unprepared when the lockdown came, why the Department of Health was relying on faxes, pen and paper for contact tracing purposes when other states had, state-of-the-art technology and systems in place.
Which I'm sure we could have just bought off them or whatever, yeah.
So there's questions like that really need examining too, because, the virus may come back, other viruses will emerge. Victoria needs to be ready, we need to be prepared, and we need to be able to respond in a way that other states have. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's great that we haven't had the loss that other parts of the world have, but when you look within Australia, Victoria has shouldered such a disproportionate burden from coronavirus because of hotel quarantine, mm-hmm. and we need to have a system in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to basically finish off now, but 2020 has been probably the most interesting year in your career as a politician, would you say?
It's been an absolutely, it's been a fascinating year. It's thrown so many unexpected challenges, and it's changed the way we live. It's changed the way we, interact with people, and I think for me, it's brought home what's important. And again,
what's important?
Well, I think the things that are immediate to you, your family, your children, your friends, and those close to you. And sometimes it's easy to not forget that, but in the rush of life, in the rush of doing things, going places, doing things, the lockdown reinforced that to me, and I feel very lucky. And this time of year with Christmas upon us, I think about all those who've had a really tough time this year, and I really hope for them they have a peaceful Christmas, and that 2021 is a more positive year and we can look forward.
I hope so. So do you still like your job?
It's an absolute privilege being a member of Parliament. It is an absolute privilege, and I feel very, very lucky to have this role, and I hope in the work I do, I repay the faith that the voters have shown in me by the work I do, and that's my job, and that's what I strive to do.
Well, we know Edward has made some great speeches in Parliament. I mean, a great speech is one thing. Hopefully we can follow through and get some of these things, ticked off, I guess, or, win some battles. But it's really hard to win because, we're outnumbered. You're outnumbered, I should say. But look, if 50,000 people were watching right now, would you have, it doesn't have to be about COVID, could be about anything, would you have a message that you'd want to share with people? I mean, you've shared messages already, but another one.
No, I'd just say to everyone, a very Merry Christmas, a very safe and peaceful Christmas, and look forward to 2021. Live your dreams, be your best, do your best, and thanks for all your support this year. And just to the community, let's rebound together next year.